and continuity designer or a lore and continuity writer, myself and Jeff Grubb are sort of the beginning of ideas for lore in Guild Wars 2. We come up with how things are created in the game, how different races work, or how magic works, how a certain character is going to be developed and what their story is. And we disseminate that information to the writers and to the designers of the events and to the people designing the skills. And they come and check with us as they create things in the game to make sure that the overall lore of Guild Wars 2 has a consistency, so that when a player sees an Asura in one area and sees an Asura in another area, they both make sense to each other, that what they believe, what they understand, how the race works, has a unified continuity. We also try to keep the history of the game so that working from Guild Wars, getting into Guild Wars 2, it continues to make sense. The things that you saw then have repercussions here, and the world is still the same world and still the same lore.
I mean, that's a nice handover, John, because you're a writer. So how far do you cooperate, and what is your more specific tasks?
Well, I'm one of the writers that Ree talked about. I've worked with a team of about 8 writers, led by our lead writer, Bobby Stein. And what I do is I work on dynamic events. So the events that you're going to be playing here, especially the fight against Tequatl the Sunless, is stuff that I or other writers have worked on. And what we do is we create characters, put them in the world, give them something to say, give them a sense of danger, a sense of urgency, and when everything is calm and cool, you talk to them. You learn about the world, you learn about what they're up to. So what we want to do is we want to make the world of Tyria seem like a living, breathing place, a place that you can all relate to despite dragons and magic and all of that stuff. So.
And one thing I want to add on to that is Jeff Grubb does a lot of the story in the dungeons. So as you're going through the dungeons in Tyria and experiencing the characters Logan and Cave, he does a lot of the writing and a lot of that story. Whereas I'm doing a lot of the story in the personal storyline that you're going through in the game and the various divergences that you can have within your character's story. But each of these pieces has to work together for the whole game as a whole to be unified.
The Norn wouldn't really have any problem with the Vigil, because the Norn want to go out into the world, they want to build their own legend, they want to be the best Norn ever. So they look upon the Vigil as a heroic organization, a place where they can go and use their might, use their power to help people who really are in danger. A Norn would love to be a member of the Vigil and go out and say, I single-handedly drove back an invasion of the undead and saved an entire village. That's how awesome I am. And if they can do it as part of the Vigil, so be it.
The Norn, as we've seen throughout Guild Wars, are very much a hero. And one thing that they do that we've seen in other parts of their lore is they are willing to follow other heroes on these adventures. The Vigil isn't so strict a military hierarchy that they have to feel like they have to report up a chain of command. It's an organization of heroes that work together in order to save the world. We've talked about the Sylvari, and we've talked about how the Sylvari are awakened within the world. The Pale Tree, 25 years ago, began to create Sylvari that went out and explored. And the first group of 12 Sylvari that she created are known as the Firstborn. And we've gotten into a few of their stories. We've seen Cade, who is one of the Firstborn. But in my blog post last week, I mentioned the first Sylvari to die, and his name was Rhiannoch. And it was really the first time that the Sylvari had any concept of death, truly, because they'd heard about it. The Pale Tree's memories from her youth, from seeing humans talk about death, but never before had a Sylvari died. And I can't get too much into the story of it because that is one of the story chains in Guild Wars 2 available for Sylvari players to play through, and it's a very important one. But I can say that every Sylvari in the game will have the opportunity to play through the Pale Tree's search for how exactly her son died. There is lore and information on Doom and Menzies in Guild Wars 2. The Ore, the continent of Ore that the dragon has brought up, was the first human settlement in the entire world of Tyria. The gods brought the humans here and first settled. When they brought them there, they were still worshippers of Abaddon, for example. Abaddon was considered a god. He'd not yet fallen. And so you are going to Ur to fight the dragon, but while you're there, you're going to be exploring this rich history of ancient human lore. So I can say there is information there for those who are looking for it. We work, Jeff Grubb and I work very closely with the writers of both of those books, with Matt Forbeck and with Rob King, to make sure that they understood the lore. And then when the book was written, they gave us a copy, and we went through and worked with them to make sure that every piece that they put in there, like Kileen's discussion of the Silvari, was being written as we were redoing the Silvari. So we had given him some information that had changed, and we went back in and talked to him about how he could revise that section. So we call a couple of times a week, we'll call them and talk about how these things work and how their story that they've proposed can take place with these details, and we'll volunteer details. The third book is going to be a little different because I have been told by our internet that I'm now allowed to announce that I will be writing the third Guild Wars novel. In fact, I am working on it when I go back to my hotel room from GamesCom. Every night I've been going home and writing more and more of the novel. A little over halfway done, so keep your fingers crossed for me. But in that case, I just know a lot about the lore, but even then, I go back to our writers, I go back to Jeff Grubb, and I say, I'm doing this with Lion's Arch, because the book is very much about the sinking of Lion's Arch, the rise of Ur. I'm doing this, I'm setting this particular Asura did this thing, is that okay? And we talk about it, and if we decide it's okay, we go to the writers team and tell them we might have a portion of a map named after that character so that you can see that it existed in the game. But we really want the novels to have an impact on the game lore-wise, and vice versa. If you go to a certain part of the game in Guild Wars 2, you will find Kileen's grave. And there's actually an area where one of the other characters from the novel visits it from time to time.